Yeah. Good evening. My name is Andy Smith. I'm the vice chair for the City of Charleston Design Review Board. Welcome to the October 2nd meeting of the City of Charleston Design Review Board. The members of the board present are Ashley Jackrell, Aaron Stevens, Ben Whitener, Dino Virgilio. Members of city staff present are David Meeks and Patrick Carlson. No board members are recused from any projects today. No items are deferred. No public comments have been submitted. The order of the meeting will be as follows. The introduction of the project and context overview by staff. Project presentation by the applicant. The 10-minute time limit is generally how we proceed. If you need an additional 10 minutes, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation. All presenters are to clearly state their name for the record. Persons affiliated with the project, designers, owners, developers, consultants, etc., should speak at this time. We'll then proceed to board questions and public comments. This also has a 10-minute time limit. The applicant does not get to respond at this time. Please clearly state your name for the record. We'll then move to staff recommendations. The applicant can respond or clarify the public comments or city staff comments. The 5-minute time limit to this. Board discussion, applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chairperson and may otherwise only speak if asked a question by the board. Board will then have a motion and a second. Any further discussions and a vote. We ask that you please turn off phones and other devices that make noise at this time. Please note, comments from the public are limited to the site design and architecture of the buildings only. This board does not have authority over zoning issues such as land use, building density, flooding, or traffic. With that, we will move to the first item on the agenda this evening. It is 1739 Savannah Highway, requesting conceptual approval for a renovation of an existing building to be converted to a new car dealership.
Thank you, Andy. Just a few context slides before we get started. I could direct your attention to the screen. We can see the red thumbtack is the location of this property. Just a little bit east of 526. Closer view is the red thumbtack. Closer view yet. This is an existing building here, and then this is the parking lot directly to the left of it, which is part of this property. Do that. And the street view, here's the existing building, which also used to be a different car dealership. And then the parking lot over to the right, low stone wall and existing signage as well. Turn over to the applicant, Stephen.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Steve Ramos. I'm an architect here in Charleston, and I'm here on behalf of my client, Mr. Graham Eubank, who is the owner of the property. If you can go to the next slide, please. This slide really kind of tells you most of what you need to know about the project. So there's an existing building that's there now. It's been, I think, a variety of car dealerships over time. It's a pre-engineered metal building, so there's a steel frame inside that building. And so what you see on the bottom is what is there today. And then I guess I would say it's kind of a nondescript building. It's clad mostly in ephes. And what you see on top is what we are proposing for the project. So effectively keeping the existing steel frame of the building and recladding that building with mostly metal panels. In addition to recladding the building, we're also kind of infilling what is kind of I guess you could call it a porch right now. There used to be, I guess they used to drive cars through that front area. And so we're kind of filling that in, bringing the facade really out to the street, adding a lot more glass to the existing building. And it's going to be a new Bronco dealership. The Bronco's been a really popular car, so much so that they're creating these kind of unique, dedicated Bronco dealerships, which is kind of unique. Next slide. And this is the aerial photo that David showed. Next. Here are existing photographs of the building. You know, it's kind of a shoebox, long linear rectangle with a short facade to the street. Next. And this is the existing site survey. So in this plan, north is down, so Savannah Highway is on the bottom. The existing parking lot more or less is staying the way it is. We are going to remove some parking spaces directly adjacent to the building, which I'll point out on the site plan. And there's going to be a number of landscape improvements as well. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see a preliminary site plan by Jody Furman, landscape architect. So most of the landscape improvements are right along Savannah Highway. There's kind of a lawn area on the left side where we're going to be adding some plants and trees. And then in front of the building, we're going to be adding a lot of landscaping as well. Next slide. This is just a very hard to read plant schedule. Next. And just a couple of things I'll point out on the site plan. Again, the parking lot, the driveway, you know, that's really all the same. This is currently the drive-through kind of porch that's being infilled. But along kind of the face of the building, there's a few kind of improvements. This right here is what we're calling the celebration bay. So that's where you pick up your vehicle, you know, when you're ready to drive off and celebrate. So that's kind of this, I guess you could call it a porch. You'll see that in the renderings. And then to the north of that, what I call the fire pit area, it's kind of an outdoor hangout spot. And there will be a fire pit there, which is kind of in line with the Bronco brand. And so those are currently parking spaces. So I think they're kind of fun and unique things that will add a little bit more life to the building. There's an existing stone site wall that will remain, as well as a monument sign that will remain. Next slide. This is the before and after floor plan. Before is on the left, new is on the right. Again, the most notable thing would be that porch that's been infilled. Next slide. And what you're seeing here, these are renderings. Well, obviously that's the Bronco vehicle in the top left. And then the renderings that you see there, those are some of the images from Ford. So like most car dealerships, they have branded elements that they want to appear on their buildings. And so we've kind of taken that and applied it to the existing building here at 1739 Savannah Highway. But what you're going to see is a building that's clad in metal panel. There's these kind of large expanses of glass and kind of like bay windows that project out that are also clad in metal. They're metal panels, but they're made to look like wood. So that's what you're seeing there. And then there's a kind of an entry feature in gray at the front door. That also is metal panel that has a kind of a concrete look. Next slide. Oh, and you can also see the fire pit and a different example of a celebration bay in that bottom left photo. Next. And here are the two-dimensional elevations. So, you know, obviously it's pretty noticeable change that we're proposing on Savannah Highway. It's definitely a contemporary building. It's kind of funky, but I think a lot of the architecture on Savannah Highway is contemporary. So I think it's very much in line with what's happening in this part of the city. And I do think it's an improvement having glass up near the street. Next. And this is the western facade, which is where the main entrance is. A lot of the existing windows or openings on this facade we're kind of keeping. And then, of course, we're adding a very large glass opening near the front of the building. Next. The back, we're not really doing much. We're just going to paint the back. That's what you're seeing here. It's really not, you know, visible. Next slide. And then this would be the east facade where the metal panel kind of wraps around the facade. And then the remaining areas, we're just going to simply paint that you see there. Next. These are just snapshots of those metal panels. Next. And then these are just some larger renderings of the building. The kind of the darker black metal panel, it has kind of a weathered steel look to it. So a lot of metal panels are just a solid contiguous color, whereas this has some modeling to it, which I think adds a little bit of life to it, which is, I think, kind of nice. There's a kind of a clerestory window that you see there on the left side. There's a display wall inside that, so this window will be above that display wall. Next. And this is just a rendering of the front. Next. One thing I want to point out, the landscape I'm showing in the renderings, I would say is loosely based off of the landscape plan. It's hard to replicate the plants exactly how they're laid out in the plan. So I just kind of included some of the larger trees, of course. But there is actually more plantings shown in the plan that are what's shown in the rendering. Next. And then this is the last slide, and you can kind of see the existing monument sign, the existing stone wall. And that's the end of the presentation. We're asking for conceptual DRB. I think it's a nice improvement to the building, and I think it'll fit well with a lot of the other contemporary buildings that are on Savannah Highway. So at this point, I'll open it up to any questions if there are any.
Move into board questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Have you thought about the lighting, the exterior lighting, how it might be integrated within the context of the projections that you're showing?
Yeah, so I think we do want to have some kind of recessed can lights in the undersides of those projections. It'll kind of put some down lighting into those areas. Excuse me. Depending on the landscaping, there may be opportunities to have some low lighting as well. There's existing parking lot lights that are in the parking lot that will likely remain. But that's about as far as we've gotten on that.
Thank you.
I was just curious, why the south elevation and the, I guess the east elevation weren't treated like you showed on the north and west elevation. Just
Sure. Well, the south is, it's the back of the garage. And that one was just, seemed like a good place to save money, being that it wasn't visible.
so that is, it's money. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's just, you can't really see it, so it just didn't seem like it was, it did seem like there was a reason to change it. Though, what would be the east facade, that longer facade, it is close to the existing property line, and there wasn't a need for a lot of openings. So, one more slide. Oh. One more. Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, the property line's about 5 feet away from this facade, but there wasn't a need for like additional windows or doors. So extending the metal all the way just didn't seem like it was necessary. Plus, I do think the pilasters, although kind of plain, they do add some, rhythm to that facade.
And the intent is to keep the existing wall basically existing, or are you painting it that gray?
Painting it.
You're
That's right.
painting that stone gray,
But
the existing wall at the street. Low wall, looks like it's
if you go forward a few sides, so the stone is remaining. The
looks like the columns are gray.
columns are stucco, and they're like a tan stucco right now, so we're kind of painting
Just
them
painting
a
those.
similar color. Yeah,
Are those existing?
they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
This existing beige color, right?
what's that?
Isn't it like a beige color now?
That's right. Yeah, and there's a photo earlier in the presentation. So we're basically, any stone that needs to be repaired will be repaired. And then that center area where you see the Bronco, that would be a new pin mounted sign that would go on.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any additional questions? Okay, move to public comment.
Chairman, I'm Donna Jacobs. I live in Burnstown. Normally I'm here. How many times we come here to complain? Sometimes it's nice to come here and compliment. So I kind of find this building fun. But the big thing I wanted to compliment the redevelopment of this property is we've all been here for the adjacent stone building. This was the original mother stone building that's set on this land originally. And I can't prove it, but I think that stone wall was built from that stone house. So I'm just very excited that you're going to leave that there as a homage to the history of West Ashley. I also appreciate all the nice landscaping. I know the car dealerships almost look like gated communities down Savannah Highway, so I appreciate that. One thing that I did not think about until board member Leolio brought it up is right behind that dealership is residences, so lighting can be directed accordingly for the people that live right behind the dealership. But I'm really excited to see the wall, and I just need to come down here and say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional? Okay, hearing none. Move to staff recommendations.
Thank you. Staff observations. Although DRB does not support prototypes, staff had discussions with the applicant about this particular design and their renovation to an existing building. We talked with them about making some changes to make this concept their own. The fact that the applicants are utilizing the existing building is one way that this building design would be unique to West Ashley with the building shape. Staff felt the building is an interesting design and we could support it. Certainly an improvement to what's there now. Staff does support the design direction. Staff comment one, at preliminary review, staff would like to see some of the materials replaced. Replace the metal panels that look like another material. For example, the L-shaped bump out element that is at the main entry door. Staff suggests this be actual cast in place concrete rather than concrete look metal panels. For the wood look metal panels at the window bump outs, staff suggests either real wood or fiber cement or wood grain board or Nichia product that has less issues than metal panels. Staff comment number two, can the existing electrical units be located on the east end of the building? I'm sorry, panels that are on the east end of the building, can they be relocated to the back of the building? If not, a DRB will require them to be screened with a fence the same color as the building facade. I'm sorry, I skipped a part. Also to paint the equipment, including the conduit above the fence that the same color as the building facade. Number three, currently there is hardscape existing along the entire east side of the building. The applicants are providing one sable palm on the east end of the building towards the front. Staff suggests removing approximately 15 feet of hardscape and adding more landscape and shrubs to this front northeast corner of the building to soften the corner of the building closest to Savannah Highway. Number four, please correct the landscape plan labels to read for the willow oak. Number five, the end columns to the existing sign, in our opinion, appear too large and out of scale for this sign. And they are leftover elements from matching the existing building. Staff suggests reducing these in size, possibly the reduced size columns wrapped in the material used from the proposed building. This could be included in the scope, but the actual sign face will require a separate application and approval towards the end of the DRB process. So referring to these two columns here, as was brought up earlier, they are matching elements that are on the existing building. We just thought they looked a little out of scale. It's just a suggestion. We thought the owner might like to see this reduced in size a little bit. Number six, staff suggests a water fountain to replace the fire pit since we are in the south. Number seven, staff would like to see another layer of landscape near Savannah Highway in the front of the parking lot. I have a couple images here. Here's a better view of the existing sign as well. It gives you a good idea of what's there now. Just suggesting reducing these in size a little bit. This is hard to see, but this is an old image from 2007, I believe. which had a lot more landscaping out front than what's proposed now. And then here's another image from 2011. Again, just a little bit more than what's proposed out there. So, and then also, I think I forgot to mention in my staff comments, but all these other palmettos are existing now. But this one in the middle was removed at some point, so we're suggesting bring that back as well. This one here. But we do recommend conceptual approval.
Right, does that have any clarifications?
I'll be brief. Thanks to Ms. Jacobs for coming out and supporting the project. And we did bring some more stone. The fire pit area has a little stone wall we're going to build around. I was trying to figure out ways to maybe bring more. Every time I did, it seemed kind of forced. I really don't have any objections to any of Mr. Meeks's comments about materials, landscape. I don't know that we'll be able to relocate the electrical panel. We'll look into it. I know we may actually underground the run of power to it, which will be an improvement, but you know, when you move the panel, it requires you to rewire everything. But we'll look into it. The water fountain in lieu of a fire pit certainly makes more sense here in Charleston. As well as, you know, reducing the columns at the monument sign. We just kept what was there, but so in general, really don't have any objections to this. Thank you.
Move into board discussion.
David, can I just clarify on staff comment number 5 about the sign? We can comment to the columns and the scale and sizing of that, but what you're saying is that what actually goes where that luxury cars of Charleston is presently, what replaces that is what's going to go in a separate application. Okay, thank you.
Can I add on that question for a moment? And if I may ask the applicant in question, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Why should we stop?
Such a precedent. If you reduce, Stephen, to reduce the columns for the signage, you would have to probably demolish the pilasters there. I guess what I'm saying is I just don't know if it's that important.
It's
I
not
think
unfortunate.
they've been there forever,
Yeah.
for a good while.
I agree. It was
Okay.
It was
Thank you for the answer. Perfect. I'm just curious. I agree with that. I think it's a wonderful addition to Savannah Highway. I think the reference retaining the little stone wall, I know it's probably somewhat painful considering what you all been through previously, but it's a nice little touch that adds back again to reference what we had discussed at previous meetings. And the Nishiha is an interesting suggestion, but maybe that's something when we get into the motion that can be deferred back to the applicant again, as to study material options that they may consider. The concrete, my fear is that that's going to be heavy at that entry portal. What do you think?
I'm fine with that. I think it's fine how they have it.
I am too. I would just be fearful that we're going to go to a lot of expense for very little.
I think
Result
I
in
think
the-
the metal look just like that's
Yeah.
perfectly appropriate.
And I like the fire pits.
I scratched that one out too. I think if that's a Bronco thing, then you know, keep the fire.
I would prefer the fire pit to the fountain.
To the fountain.
I mean, I'll go make some s'mores. I live right around the back.
I love it.
It's because fountains tend to get problematic.
They can.
Yeah. Can you, are you finished?
I'm done. Thank
Okay.
you.
Can you flip to the landscape plan? I wanted to look at your comment 3, David. I wanted to understand exactly what we were talking about there.
adding a little more landscape out here.
And you had said there where that extra hardscape is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, over
Were you
here.
talking there?
East
Okay,
side.
that's what I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
what
it's
you
like
were
right
saying.
in here.
So Just,
Let me go to that rendering and show you real quick what they're proposing.
Basically, it's to stay the same, right, on the east side?
Yeah,
it's just,
They're adding
okay,
One tree.
one tree there. Suggesting taking a little hardscape by sopping its corner. but,
yeah,
you
is
know,
that like a tree well? Or is it just a hole in the concrete or what's
Creating
the,
something.
That is what it was gonna be, but once we looked at running power underground there, we may have to demolish more of that hardscape anyway.
Hmm.
So, but that's what's proposed is an actual just tree well.
and that's existing concrete around it?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're just gonna cut out.
My comment is, that east elevation that you, the hardscape and the east elevation staying the same. I feel like that's the weakest point of the proposal. I like the west side, but, you know, I mean, I think both sides of Savannah Highway are equally important to see.
I was gonna say,
With
it's
the
not
sign.
invisible on that side, you
Yeah,
see it.
and-
Yeah.
With landscaping and with architecture, you know, I don't know if I'd be okay if you came back with something more inventive and from a landscaping side to add there, or it'd just be easier to continue the metal panel back to the rear. I'm okay leaving the rear like it is. I don't have an issue with that, but,
I'm thinking that landscaping.
or if you can do landscaping, yeah, use some Italian cypress trees to echo
Yeah.
along there to really break it up. I don't know.
Well,
It's essential.
architects starting to get into landscape.
that's fair to say,
Something vertical, you know? So you only
I
have
mean-
5 feet, right? In that you
Yeah.
only have 5 feet before property line, so you don't have much space to do anything, right, really.
I mean, from my point, I think that there's nothing really to. I think the design is strong enough, minus that east side, that I really think that they need to kind of study this landscape and simplify it. I think focusing more on natives and,
Yeah,
I mean, I think the building. I think the ruggedness of the building would benefit from. A more like low country feel to the landscape.
There are a lot of non-native.
I think it would help
plants.
kind of, because it would help kind of ground it
Yeah.
in its place a little better.
Yes.
I think too, and it's not just the non-natives, because even some of the natives that are chosen here. I
Yeah.
Don't think are right for the site, because I think, and conceptually, it's hard to say what's conceptual and landscape and not get into too much detail, so. But I do think that. When this gets restudied, remember how harsh of a site this is gonna be for landscape, and there's a few, especially trees, the dogwoods and the Japanese maple, that. They like to be in a protected shaded condition, and this is the side of a
Parking
highway.
lot.
and-
Yeah, it's a bad
It's-
site for those
yeah.
plants.
And so I was surprised to see both of those in the plant list, considering the context, so. You know, not anything that needs to hold up conceptual approval, but I think
I think the whole.
it'll
landscape-
make things more efficient if those comments are heard now, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think refine, restudy, simplify the landscaping is. I think you're saying the same thing,
Consider the
consider the context.
and the microclimate that we're in.
And then at the next level, I'd like to see how that fire pit area, because it's kind of left out here. And in the renderings, you'll have a very welcoming area there, and that seems to be very important, a very important focal piece. I think seeing how that design is pulled off is going to be very important.
And you might want to consider some landscaping plants around the fire pit area too, because it's gonna be really hot if it's just
Yeah.
fire and concrete in August in Charleston.
Yeah, wet, right. That's much here in summer. Save you the gas bill. Or have a lot of bottles of water out there. Yeah, so we have a board motion.
Everyone looks at you.
I would move for conceptual approval with Staff comments 2. 4. 7. Big space. Oh, we didn't know that.
The valley will establish.
Yeah, that's all right. And 8. With board comments, number 1. To restudy building material palette. Specific interest, emphasis on the projections, whether they be metal or nichia. We certainly would leave that to the architect's discretion. Restudy the landscape by simplifying and providing a more local flavor as far as the landscape palette. And I would include in that additional landscape study on the east elevation. And then just verify lighting levels. To ensure that we are not encroaching visually on the neighbors. Did I read anything else? Does anybody?
Would you-
think strongly about that?
And I know you left out 3. Do we want to leave that out or? I think you skipped it when you were doing numbers.
I'm sorry, yes. I'm sorry.
Feel
Staff
like that
comment.
they kind of came back to it in board comments, so
I
either
have a
way.
question about your motion. Can I ask?
Absolutely.
The intent of your, the comment about studying the landscape on the east, is that? So that's, I guess I have issue with leaving the existing eaves with the all new building material on the west and the north.
Yeah,
Is that can we,
I guess
I mean, if it's super low shrubbery,
and I think that from what it appears to me, I'm just visually looking at it, is that there was a deliberate attempt to address a specific geometry on the front of the building. In that regard,
I think
I
it has a
don't-
closure on the
I mean,
east side.
if you start taking the metal panels down that east facade, then probably the question is going to be, why don't you take it on the south and then complete it? And I think the application probably is sufficient. I think if the landscape is appropriately provided, and I think the applicant hears what we're saying, that I think that the painted metal panels would probably,
I
it's
think-
my feeling.
I think painted is fine as long as there's landscaping that addresses that elevation, so it's not bare. Yes,
I agree. I understand.
Is, can we provide detailing of the fire pit area?
Yes, please.
At preliminary. Okay, so we have a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8. To restudy with board comments to restudy the building materials, specific emphasis on the projections and the nichia panel. Simplify and restudy the landscape palette. Restudy landscaping on the east side. Verify lighting levels to not encroach on the neighbors. And provide detailing of the fire pit areas at preliminary. Do we have a second?
second,
Okay,
Yes, all right, actually, we should have, well,
no, you can second
Discussion.
first.
the second, then we should have a
Yeah.
discussion.
I was just wondering if we should add something in there about the landscape being more contextually appropriate. I don't think, like, as far as just the microclimate.
Simplify landscape palette
Because more, to me, it's
And
simplifying it isn't the issue, it's
to.
picking the right plant.
I think it was originally mentioned
Yeah,
some
be
local
more-
flavor.
More, I think it's more contextual.
Yeah, I just didn't get included when Andy read
Like
it.
that big word.
I thought I'd throw something new out.
Little flavor to the land, I guess.
So we're going to- Venus actually did say it, but to be more contextual to the second board comment.
And I certainly will accept that. Part of the motion.
Ben.
Second.
Second. Okay, we'll take a vote. Ashley,
Yes, in favor.
Aaron,
Yes, in favor.
and I am also yes in favor.
Thank you.
Is that open? Congratulations. Okay, so we will move to the second item on our agenda, which is 300 Albemarle Road. And this is requesting conceptual approval. Conceptual approval.
That was it.
No, we're approving context also for a new chapel at Porter Gaud School. Also containing classrooms, offices, and a separate bell tower. David.
Thank you. Just a few context slides before we get started.
Okay.
I could direct your attention to the screen, you see the red thumbtack. This is on the very west end of Ashley. Here's a closer view. This is the Porter Gaud campus. And the thumbtack, the location's right about here. There's a closer view, right where Ashley Point Drive and Albemarle Road come together. There's also an existing drive right in here, which you can't see because of the trees, but that's included in the plan. You'll see in the site plan. And the actually front of the chapel will be facing inward to campus right about here. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Paulette Myers. I'm with Millen Passon Smith, and I'm here to present something completely different than what you just saw. Very historical context here. Tom Owenby is here on behalf of the Porter Gaud School as well today. So thank you. We'll just get started. We just want to show you a little bit about site context.
Let me know when you'd like to advance the slides.
Go ahead. We're going to skip through the first few quickly because we'll talk about site, and you already know where it is. So let's just skip through these. Move forward. Once again, that's the campus. Go back. Can you go back one, David?
Sure.
Just want to show you a little bit more about where you can see just the context where if you're familiar with Porter Gaud campus, there's called the S&T building, which sits right here, which some think is the front of the building, and then the new upper school, which some think are the front of the building right now. And so the chapel will be right here between the two, and the carpool lane going around it. And then a little bit about context. You are located on a campus, so everything around it is the school. So there are all academic buildings. Please go forward. So all academic buildings around it. So you can see a photo there across from Albemarle Road if you're walking from the stadium to the site. And then you'll see it again next to the S&T building on your left. And this is where we're building right there to your right is that open campus. Keep moving. Next slide. And then that is the upper school, which we built about in 2016, I believe. So that was completed in 2016. So that's the other context, the two things we draw from there on campus. And the next slide. Just another photo of the upper school. And next slide. And then we'll talk about the concept. So many of you may or may not know the history of Porter Gaud. It was located downtown. Dr. Porter had the campus located downtown. Next slide, please, David. And so when Porter Gaud came to us and talked about what they wanted this new chapel to be, they wanted to be reminiscent and actually to closely resemble St. Luke's. St. Luke's was on their original campus when Porter Gaud was located downtown. It's currently owned by MUSC and they use it. So you'll see in our design how that context is taken. You'll see similar in the eave details. You'll see window details that are similar. And you'll see we'll take some cues of the brick color from not only St. Luke's, but also from the upper school and the S&T, the design cues of the new building. Next slide. And then just quick interior of the building. You can see some of those details we'll take also for the interior of the building. Next slide. And then the design. I'm going too fast, I can slow down, but once again, this is the site. This is that elevation, which kind of shows the chapel here right in the center, as you would see it through the road with the S&T building and the upper school. And then an overview of that chapel, how it sits there. And the next slide will show you what we took. So we did get approval from BZA SD, and amazing trees on this site. We are really trying hard to nestle this chapel into this existing site. So what you'll see here are these two purple spots are the only two trees we have to remove, and we'll mitigate those. All the blue are grand oaks, and then the green are also protected trees. So we'll be saving all the rest of those in that. Just wanted to show you that we've already been there and those two are approved. Next slide. And then you can flip through these. We just showed these surveys just because you asked us to. It's a relatively level site. I say that our civil engineer does not, because we do have a couple of feet that we have to mitigate across the entire site. And then here is our landscape plan. I think we zoom into the landscape plan a little bit, but what you'll see in the landscape plan is here's our footprint. Our footprint's about 11,000 square feet on the site. And then the landscape plan starts to show some permeable pavers because we need that for stormwater. And then a garden plan as well here as you enter the site. I think the next slide might zoom into it a little bit more, maybe not as clear. So the new approach will be to the front of the campus through. We're actually relocating. They have a bell tower, which is in the rear of the campus. We're recreating that bell tower and copying it in its position and bringing it forward. The reason the chapel is at the front of the school is because it's an Episcopal school. So they think putting this chapel in the front of the campus is the appropriate thing to do to show their faith, the Episcopal faith of Puerto Rico. What else is important here? You'll see we created this garden here in honor the new bell tower be located here. And then there's also a few memorial gardens already within that plaza, and then we're connecting. That's why you see this meandering path that goes to the right here. It's just connecting some of those original memorial gardens there. Let's go to the next slide. And just a floor plan. You'll see the floor plan is pretty simple. It's a chapel, seat 600. And then 2 classroom spaces and 3 offices. It's pretty simple because we're trying to keep that footprint as small as we can to just let those trees continue to survive there. What else is important about that floor plan? I think the most important thing is just that we tried to separate those two just a little bit with a pause between the buildings. So it's a traditional chapel and then a 1-story structure adjacent to it. And you'll see in the following elevations. That elevation, you'll see that is the north elevation. You guys help me there while I'm reading it. This is the elevation that you'll see, and I do have some renderings that'll be a little clearer. So this is the street elevation. So when I'm on Albemarle, so that's actually the altar end, as David said, the campus faces inside the campus. So this is actually your street view. And you'll see that watchtower. It's exactly replicated from the rear. And then we take a few, you'll see it on the next slide. Few of the materials, it will be brick with some cast stone accents and then with some wood accents as well. And then a shingled roof, which most of the roofs are shingled there on campus. Next slide. And the view from the interior of the campus from the carpool loop looking in. See the classroom building on the right and the chapel on the left. And then just the other long view on the other side. And I think next slide. And then an overview of how the chapel fits in that plaza. As you see, these are the original gates also from the downtown campus once. So you'll come through the existing, you'll walk past the tower and either around into the church or either into the campus now. We're changing the front door, not the front door, but the security of the campus as well. Right now, the campus is secured at that S&T building here. And you'll see this fence here. And now we're starting to move that security a little further to the street. So the campus is protected, the students there on campus. It'll be a very similar open fencing with some shrubs to do that. The next slide. And then that view from Albemarle Road. And like I said, brick materials, there's some existing columns there that are existing. So we're trying to play on that a little bit and use those throughout. And then the stone, you'll see it a little bit around the classroom building. That's kind of harking from both the upper school and the S&T building. And then the next slide. And then the slide from the school, this is as if you're in that existing school looking back out, and then you'll see some wood surrounds around those windows. That's kind of, we use that also at the upper school. There's portals with portals that you walk through. So we're trying to bring that wood there as well. It's a cedar that we use there. We hope to use something very similar. So you're bringing elements of not only St. Luke's downtown, but also the S&T building and the upper school. Look, I kind of ran through that. Stained glass, I didn't talk about the stained glass. Currently, we're putting stained glass on the other side, the street side of the building. And then with their future growth, they'll add the stained glass as they develop. Is that our last slide?
Yes.
Might be, yeah, it is. Not sure what I forgot, but I'll open it to questions.
Move into board questions.
I have a question.
I was looking for Zoom, I'm sorry.
I know, I was
Seeing it.
just trying to. And I know we're conceptual right now, but I'm curious if you have any more information. You mentioned those garden, like the garden area around the bell tower and all. Is that like lawn and brick or
Yeah,
what? Or is it gonna have like memorial elements or? Is it-
We may have a memorial element in there. Right now, it's lawn. You can see this part is paved, so the center around the tower is paved area, and these are two lawns. They can use them as outdoor classrooms.
Okay.
Or we may put a sculpture. We may bring Dr. Porter, he's in the back of the campus. We may bring him forward. The actual statue, not, the actual statue may move here as well. The existing memorial gardens are here, and then there's kind of a veteran memorial as well there. So it's really just trying to tie those together. Most of our plant material is rather small. There's a lot of boxwoods existing, so we've added some boxwoods. And when I say, I'm not going to say native vegetation, I'm going to say low country vegetation. So there's a lot of mondo grass. You'll see just some grasses, some low country grasses as well. So there's a lot of planting.
Is the paved area,
Smaller.
is that the permeable pavements or is that brick or is that not
It's
sure
brick.
yet?
Brick
It's brick.
paving.
Okay, great.
And these are this whole, we replace this with permeable pavers because we need that for storm drainage.
But the garden itself will be
Storms
brick.
on the garden is brick, and then 2 grass lawns.
Okay. And then the walkway that connects the garden to the front, is that concrete or?
We changed this back to concrete, it's just a scored concrete here. Change that back to concrete. It has a little brick edging on it.
Okay.
Most of their walks are all concrete on campus.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Other questions?
I had a couple of questions, simple.
After you.
Oh, okay, go ahead. You said cedar, I guess, is the wood? Is that right?
We did use cedar previously.
I was just curious, I mean, is it holding up for the building? what,
It takes a little
2006?
maintenance. It takes a little maintenance, but it's holding up well. I mean, that's 6 years.
Okay.
It's held up well.
I was just curious.
I don't know if you've seen it. It's on the portal. It's on the ends of the portal of that school.
Great. The only other question, I understand site constraints. I know that the original building does have an altar facing east. Did you look at altar facing east
We tried.
for the, yeah, the technical design? I just wondering.
We tried.
Tried, it just didn't work.
It's tight site. So we tried to move it around.
Curious.
That's where it works. And also you see it when you're driving down, driving down the street. So
Understood. That's all I had.
it's hard to decide about those trees. They're important. We're really wedging it in there.
Paula, that was kind of a follow-up of my question. Would you go back a little enlarged landscape plan one more time? It appears at the top of the page where the gates are located is the entry portal right there?
So honestly, you actually enter through, it's hard to see here. You enter here and here, those little pavilions that were already built that are existing there now, you come through the sides. The gate is kind of in a fixed position. We show it open now, but it's really fixed. So you're gonna come through those little portals and walk around the new tower, the new bell tower.
So walk me through that for a moment. You come through the portals into what appears to be that rectilinear paved space. And the bell tower is the square right
here.
there, yes. And then you come through the bell tower into the landscaped area?
Well, you're on a walk, basically.
Yes.
So this is all solid. It's all brick. So I'm walking all through the brick here on the path and then here, and then I'm going across and going to school.
Okay.
Like typically in the morning, no one's coming, like no one's going to the chapel in the morning. They're going to classes. They're checking in at this building or at this building. So they're coming around. This is where we need them to cross because it's congested there at that corner. So they have to come through here, mitigate through. So they're really not entering the chapel when they approach campus. They're entering the chapel when they're going to chapel during the day. So they're coming back out and going to chapel from here, going to chapel from here, or the lower school is going from campus as well. But they're all going this way to this building.
So the little square is the bell tower.
Right here.
Yes. And then the larger square is a landscape paved zone. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that rendering? I guess we don't show that in the view that you saw from the rendering. It's probably hard to see because there's a big tree. there.
And it was.
There's a big tree.
And it, I was looking so forward to this meeting because of this project, because, I think it's just magnificent put together and just beautifully thought out. I was just wondering, there is a tendency, and this, I may be overstating this, and I'd really like your opinion on this, of wanting to align the entry with the walkway, but it looks like the existing vegetation may preclude that. Is that, or was that even important?
We need you to wander. We need you to meander as you walk in. You know, just come on. You need to meander. No, that's not what it is. Very difficult. We felt that at first. You need to come through here and line up. We cannot hurt these trees anymore. We got to stay as far away.
Okay.
We cannot shrink this building anymore.
Gotcha. So it's predicated on just the existing landscape and
It's
respecting.
predicated
So-
on the, if you go there, you see these trees, then you wanna help them survive as well. And then we thought, that's why we intentionally stopped lining everything up. We intentionally stopped lining everything up, so we.
Well, I feel better that you thought through it on that aspect.
Right, team, I mean, you have to meander just a little bit because of that.
Yeah, well, I'm probably the only
You
one
made it
old
even more
enough here.
difficult, so you turn twice. You turn
Yeah.
twice instead of just once.
That was just good
Just to feel.
exercise. I'm the only one probably old enough here to remember when Porter Military Academy was actually downtown on that site. And I think you have the thoughtfulness, the way that you have recaptured the essence and placement is, I'm sorry, I'll save that for board comments. That's all the questions I have.
I have one more question. Just you were explaining the circulation and like shifting the security forward and everything. But the carpool lane still comes behind the church, is that right? I mean, I know that's not
Are you a parent?
really.
Are you a parent?
I am not here, but.
I'm in here. Okay, not there yet. Okay. No,
Not
the carpool line honestly was rerouted when we built the upper school. So the carpool line actually comes over here and around. So they will control this, they will control this, but not during the day. It will not be open, you know, it's controlled. So the carpool line honestly has been coming around this way for a while now, in front of the upper school, because we needed a longer lane for that. So this will be closed, it'll be controlled, the school will control it, but it will be closed quite a bit.
But the carpool line comes between the buildings.
The carpool line still does this, it's just,
Yeah.
it's just the way they need to do it. That's why you'll see we have lots of bollards here. They already have bollards at the S&T building. So we're just trying to create that as safe environment as possible. But hopefully most of the time when they're going to the chapel, the cars aren't there anyway, because now we have this series of gates where people just can't get into the campus like they can now.
Any additional? Okay. Hearing none, public comment? Hearing none. Staff recommendations.
Thank you. The applicants received BZAS approval on 9/6/23 for the requested tree removals. Staff supports the height, scale, mass of the project as well as the design direction and materials. We feel like this is a very attractive addition to the campus. Landscape design and planting plan are looking nice, especially around the bell tower and how the design ties into the existing round patio park. There's only one staff comment. I would like to preface it by saying that I did not realize that this bell tower was being replicated by another tower that's on campus. So take this one with a grain of salt, but I will go ahead and read it. Staff recommends that the bell tower be studied to be less plain or flat. We understand it relates more to the adjacent classrooms with the flat roof, but we feel it should relate more to the chapel. Perhaps the ground plane pass-through has a Gothic arch rather than a square opening. And we also feel the top of the tower should relate more to the peak of the chapel roof. Some more brick detailing may also help improve the design. But with that said, we do recommend conceptual approval.
David, would you like to respond to staff comments?
I feel like you responded to it yourself, that it's a replica. We can look at some brick banding, but it is the intent that we bring that forward, that building forward. It's important to the campus. It's an important symbol already on the campus. So I think the owner definitely feels like it should be the same as it is to replicate that.
Will the existing bell tower stay?
No, we'll have to demolish it. We'll have to demolish it. It's in the back of the campus. It is important. The existing chapel is there as well. It's very small. I mean, this will seat 600 folks. They can't even see the class. They can see the classroom basically now. So this will seat a whole upper school, all of their students. So yeah, bell tower will be removed. The chapel will remain back there and just use as another function.
So we're gonna move into Dinos's second question period.
Second question. Second, third question.
I jumped ahead here.
It's just an age thing. I'm sorry, I wrote it down and forgot to ask the question. The stained glass, who's designing that?
We're not exactly sure yet. I think the first three we're gonna take from St. Luke's. I think
Okay.
they're gonna be replica. We had a meeting about that today. So they're forming a committee to decide. But we are looking at 2 different stained glass companies right now to
Okay.
do it. But we gotta get a design first for them to decide what they want. It'll be easy if they just choose what's already in St. Luke's, but we'll see. Like I said, we
Yes.
have donors. Basically, the donors provide the stained glass. So we'll start with the 3, and then we're designing all the windows so they can receive stained glass in the future.
Are those stained glass at St. Luke proprietary?
Not sure. We'll find out.
I'm just curious, because I know we've ran into that once before.
Really,
It's just-
that's good advice. Good
Can't
advice.
copy it.
I couldn't copy it.
No kidding.
No, would not allow the donor to
professionally
copy it.
designed, okay.
It was a personal thing.
Wow.
Thank you for your obliging me. I'm sorry.
So we are in board discussion.
Yeah, I just very quickly, and then I'll be quiet, because I really think this is highly successful, and I do like the simplicity of the tower when it's compared to the detailing of the chapel and the ancillary structure, and the fact that all natural materials. We have used the Western cedar, and as you well know, it has to be sealed on every side. And it takes a lot of guidance in that regards, but if it's sealed on every side, it really holds up for a 3 to 5 year period before any type of refinishing has to go on it. But it does, it's so wonderful the way it ages. So I think the material palette is just absolutely wonderful. The only comment that I would have, and I hope this might get into the motion, just to restudy, is the portal under the tower itself. I think as important as potentially that form is, which is clean, is the surface under in the ceiling itself, and what that becomes. It's almost out of our purview, I feel, but I think that's just as important to the success of that portal as the structure itself. Is the bell?
Go ahead.
Is it? Is this the existing bell?
Yes, it will be relocated. We're looking at a safe way to be able to make it ring.
And that
Considering
would
now it's at the front of the campus, so we're looking at that to see if it may be a switched.
Electronic.
Yeah, in lieu of.
And I'll just offer, if you need it, someone let us know. We
Okay,
did that before, and
great.
but anyway, I think it's great. I'm afraid to touch anything because I'd screw it up, but looks wonderful.
Yeah, I think personally that, I mean, the chapel, the design is really great. I think that we're lacking some in the landscape design. I mean, just all of the elements. I mean, we have a plan, but it's big. I think we're missing a lot of the details, even in concept.
I do like the conceptual, like the layout of it, I think is nice. I like the organization of it. I think it works well with the space. So I don't know if I'm disagreeing with you or not, 'cause I'm not sure if you're just not liking the.
Yeah,
But it's
I
like
just,
the
I think that I think there's some things at the next level, looking at how it that probably need to be looked at. I think that it's kind of one kind of. Then it's not really, a lot of the elements aren't even don't show up on the second page. I think
Yeah, I had a hard time understanding what exactly was being proposed in the.
I think that's where is even at a conceptual level, I think we're kind of missing some elements. That I could say, going into preliminary, yeah, I really understand your train of thought to the next level. So I think I just need to be strengthened that. And to me, it's just more, and I think that Dinos's questions about wayfinding kind of come out of that a little bit too. So, for me, it's just, better development of the landscape plan elements. And, I mean, like I said, we can start looking at how it, but that's the next level.
I like the simplicity of the garden layout though, like I like.
I mean, the
ocean
layout
brick
itself
and
is
the
very,
lawn.
very, very nice, I think.
Seems appropriate, especially with having those memorials adjacent to it, that it's not
I don't think-
disrupting them, it's still honoring them, but adding. so.
I don't think there's anything that's holding anything up. I think it's just a general comment of
Yeah.
when we get to the next level, I think some better understanding.
And I love that y'all are working around the trees. I think that's gonna add so much of a
You guys want to
substantial
cut the trees
landscape.
down.
Well, it couldn't be done. No, but I think that is like what this landscape should celebrate is these existing oaks that are
Yeah.
really beautiful.
And
So,
from a drainage standpoint too, I mean, I
Yeah.
know this is kind of more not macro drainage, but of just making sure that we're not impounding water or drying them out either. I think there's a lot of, we go through a lot of drastic measures to save the grand trees and then we'll kill them.
And just one comment, David, if I could convey to staff, if an applicant comes and asks how they should possibly organize their presentation, site context,
Yeah.
concept design is just so easy to understand and just well done. So might just offer that to any future applicants that come forward.
I just have one comment and it's not negative. It's floor plan's great. The materials are great in my opinion. And if the owner likes, almost a literal copy of the chapel, that perfectly fine. I really felt like it could take some artistic license to go a little further on the chapel. A little bit more contemporary where it is. It's you don't have to copy. It can be more glass. Maybe you keep the form of the roof and the building. I mean, you're not copying the liturgical correct east. Take some more artistic license on. You don't have to do the little detail at the eave. If that's what the owner wants, I'm totally supportive because I think the rest of the building helps it and it's okay. It wouldn't bother me if it was pushed further.
Mhm.
But this is perfectly fine with me.
Do we have a motion?
Go ahead, Dino.
I'm delighted to move for conceptual approval. Was there any landscape issue specific to that?
Just better develop the landscape plan.
Keep going.
I don't have any other comments.
Oh, yeah.
This is unbelievable.
We have a motion for conceptual approval,
I'll second.
second by Aaron. I'll roll Ashley.
So the only board comment was to further develop the
There
land.
really wasn't any comment.
There
made
wasn't.
in the motion.
Seemed to happen, or
I'm a yes.
They heard our discussions.
Then
Yes, in favor.
I'm also yes in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to go into item number 3, which is board discussion of rules and procedures of the design review board related to meeting schedules.
Is it possible at all that we can go do the minutes? In September?
So,
You want to stay on that? Okay, that's fine.
no, I mean, we can move it up. I mean, I think we have to make a motion to,
I'll motion to amend the agenda to address item B, approval of the minutes from the September 18th meeting.
we have a second of this motion.
I second that.
Aaron,
Yes.
then I'm also in favor. So we are going to amend the agenda to approve the minutes from September 18th, 2023.
We'll also move that we approve the minutes from the September 18th meeting.
Second.
Oh,
This is
so
amazing.
moved, yes.
So I thought you were saying second.
Yes, I can't second.
No, I thought you, okay.
Yes.
Seconded by Dinos. Aaron,
Yes, in favor.
Ben,
Yes, in favor.
I'm also in favor. So now we will move back to item number 3 under A, discussion of rules and procedures of the design review board related to meeting schedule.
Robert, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Design Review Board. So hopefully you can see me as well as hear me. This is Robert, for the record, Robert Summerfield, Director of Planning, Preservation and Sustainability. This item is just a discussion item today. Hopefully, depending on how this discussion goes, we'll bring this back before you at a later meeting for action. But we wanted to begin a discussion with the DRB. We've already begun this discussion with the boards of architectural review, both large and small, about some changes that we're looking at to address some, I don't want to say issues, but to address some things that we've noticed related to the number of meetings that we conduct, and particularly not just the number of meetings that we conduct, but the very narrow window between when we accept applications and when that application would go before a board. So this item is both 2 parts. One, it's to have a conversation about the number of meetings that we conduct a year for in this case, the DRB, but it's also to talk about the deadlines for when applications are due and at what meeting then that provides them for. There's also a conversation about setting an agenda limit. I think in DRB's case, this is not usually an issue, but again, we want to have that in a conversation. So David, do you have the slides up? So really quick, again, this is what you all do for us, and we really appreciate that you do this for us, but you all conduct 2 meetings per month. There's for our applicants that just presented, they well know there's only 12 days between when they submit their application and when it goes to the meeting. And on the face of it, that sounds awesome for the applicants. We're going to talk a little bit about why that may not be the best, not just for the applicants, but also for staff and the public on those things. In general, it takes about 28 hours per meeting of staff time to prepare and conduct the meeting. That's 27 or about 28 hours that they're doing just relative to the meeting, which can significantly reduce the number of hours they have in their work week for other things like administrative reviews and things like that. Additionally, and again, this is not such an issue necessarily for DRB. You all typically have about 3 projects per agenda. We would be looking, if we did go to a model with fewer meetings per year, we may want to talk about just, is there a need for any limits on those? Again, with DRB, we don't anticipate this. This is more a discussion we've been having with the boards of architectural review. Next slide. So what we're proposing in 2024 for the discussion purposes today is we would like to look at for shifting the deadline to add more time between when applications are submitted to staff and when the meeting is. Right now it's 12 days. We'd like to move that to 19 days. We'd also like to take a look at moving from 2 meetings a month to 1 meeting a month. With no, we're not suggesting, but we put it out there because we talked about it with the other boards. We're not actually suggesting an agenda cap at this time because, again, you all, your number of projects are well below the caps that we see in the other boards. Next slide. Just so that you can see what we are looking at for the other boards, our design review boards. We are looking to do a shift on deadlines and meeting date window for our BAR large. That one's a more significant shift. Also looking to take that from 2 meetings a month down to 1 meeting. They do have a current limit on 8 items per agenda. We'd be looking to bump that up a little bit if they were to go to 1 meeting a month. And then BAR small, we're looking to also change that review period between the deadline and when the meeting would be. Because of the number of applications that the BAR small averages, we're actually not at this time in a position to reduce the number of meetings that they currently conduct per year. Next slide. So here's why we are looking to do this. So the deadline shift, the longer public notice and improved transparency item is huge. This will allow us to provide more upfront information and sooner. So right now, the window for David and Tori and the preservation team to review an application, to begin to formulate recommendations, to do all the work leading up to the meeting, and to provide that information back to the applicant, to the board and to the public at large is very, very narrow. And so one of the biggest components of this additional time, and to be more consistent with other boards that the planning department supports, like our planning commission and our BZAs, we believe that if we can bump up that window between when an application is submitted and when it goes to the board, that will allow the team to do a better job in our review because we won't feel as rushed. It will also allow us to be more concrete on deadlines so that we can get information up on the website at an earlier date, get information to applicants about any proposed comments or conditions that we may be looking to impose on their review, and get that in a more complete package to the board members and the public for their review so that they know and can begin to think about what their comments might be as they're preparing to come to a meeting. So that's that part. The other components of this, and it's really not the purpose, but it is a result of reducing the number of meetings. It will reduce our advertising costs. We won't be advertising twice a month anymore. It will reduce our security needs, which can be, because that's overtime, that can add up to a significant cost when we factor that across all the meetings that the planning department does. And this is mainly, again, the added benefit for you all is it's just fewer meetings that board members have to do. That said, if you have a meeting with 5 items on it instead of 3, you may have a longer 1 meeting a month that you'd be preparing for instead of trying to prepare for 2 meetings a month. We all know that you have very busy schedules in your day-to-day life. And finally, again, this is a benefit that we would get from this change, but not necessarily the reason we're doing it. It would also allow staff to spend more time on staff reviews and other things that are more administrative to our development review process and design review board versus meeting preparation and what have you. Next slide, David. This just provides some more information about what this would look like for that kind of reallocated staff resources and time. Next slide. And with that, yeah, we don't need this part unless anyone cares about all the stat stuff. Again, not needed for this. So this would be a sample of what the schedule would look like if we were to move to this direction. With that, I'm pretty sure that was the end of our presentation. I'm here to answer any comments. I also think that Miss Mandy Herring from our office is in your audience, possibly still. Between the two of us, hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions you all might have about this proposal. But again, this is for you all to discuss.
Move to board questions.
Is the time staying this time would stay the same, 4:30?
Yes, sir. So it would, the time of the meetings would not change. I believe we would be doing it on the third Monday of every month, but it would still be a 4:30 start time. And then again, this board has the fewest items generally. So we're honestly not overly concerned about a limit, but it would obviously, if you're hearing 5 items instead of 3, that's going to tack on probably another, 45 minutes, an hour, maybe as much as an hour and a half, depending on the discussion to a meeting night for you all. But only once a month instead of twice a month.
Would this-
You woke me up.
Just kidding.
So this would kick in, if we talk about it, voted on it, it'd kick in at the first of the year, is that right? Is that what you're?
Correct. Yes. So this is if the board approves this, we would be looking to initiate this change for the new year. Additionally, if we did have, a significant run on new projects coming on Savannah Highway, like just a redevelopment plan West Ashley blows up and we get tons of new projects coming forward, and we needed to do a second meeting, we would get with the chair and coordinate in advance to get on people's schedule. So we would not look to inundate any individual meeting with too many items. If there was a need in any given meeting cycle to think about having a second meeting in that month, we would coordinate that with the chair and with the committee members or the board members and schedule that as a special meeting. So that's another kind of safety net that we have. That doesn't mean we have to cram everything into one meeting if there's a legitimate need to do a special meeting in that month.
And I would also offer just that, come June or July, if we went with the one meeting a month schedule, if by June you're like, this is not working, we could always add more meetings to the schedule, as Robert mentioned, even go back to like 2 meetings a month. So, and I did just want to, Robert touched on this, but I did just want to give you a little bit more background to this. So our Preservation and Urban Design Division is a staff of 6. We have 3 board administrators. They administer 66 public meetings a year. And so there's a lot of time, important time invested in that. And I think their favorite part about their jobs is meeting with y'all and having these board meetings. But what we realized over the number of years since we made some adjustments to the BAR, large and small, and added more and more properties to our purview, is that there's not enough time in the day to get to everything for the division as a whole. So we're stepping back and we're looking at how can we make some efficiencies within the division for all the different staff members and the boards to, kind of improve some of our processes, be a little more efficient, be able to get to projects a little bit quicker. So that's why we're not just looking at BAR large, we're looking at all 3 boards. How can we help staff? How can we make staff more available to applicants and customers outside of the meeting? And how do we get permits? How do we, when someone is actually wanting that building permit after it's gone through, the 3 phases of conceptual, preliminary, and final review, when they want that building permit, how do we get them that building permit quicker and do some other staff level reviews? So it's kind of a, we're trying to take a holistic approach. And this might not be the magic bullet. You might have some thoughts in your mind right now that, hey, look at this, and we're happy to do this. That's why we wanted to have a discussion tonight first, rather than just a vote.
I've got one more comment as a positive to applicants that we didn't really mention is the turnaround time, excuse me, from the time of the meeting. On Monday, the next submittal deadline is on 2 days later on Wednesday. So they really never are able to make that next submittal deadline. They have to wait a meeting. Whereas this would allow them, after attending the board meeting, to possibly make those changes and make the next meeting. Well, I guess it's about the same time. But
It's the same time, but no one feels rushed now
Right.
with an arbitrary like 2 day turnaround that they would have now. I mean, that's an excellent point. The reality is, you know, one of the things that Charleston is known for is the quality, and we help deliver that quality, I think, completely by making sure that everybody has enough time to do their job, whether that be the applicant, whether that be staff, or whether that be the public or the board being able to do their due diligence on the project.
one other suggestion. You know, you said we weren't going to address the tap for projects. I don't know, it's been a long time and we have only been getting a few projects, but there was a time back in 2019, 18, when I first started. I remember this because it was near when my mom passed away, that we had 12 agenda items and I was very stressed.
As
And
you say, the three agenda items has been really, you know, speaking more geologic time than not quite as geologic as Venus, but I mean, I do
Just
remember
not
when
feeling the love right now for some reason.
that the board had a lot of agenda items, and I remember I was telling somebody that I remember, you know, we just not come until 8 o'clock at night because we weren't going to be in, and we don't really, you know, the later in the evening, and I only speak for myself, get a little bit more irritated as not that it's real hard to irritate me to begin with, but you know, the feedback is, I don't think, as beneficial to the client, to the applicant.
So, you know, I just thought it wouldn't make any harm to settle it.
Well, I think that we're approaching a couple of things here. So David, you mentioned extending that deadline. That's great, but we have had projects recently which have met the deadline. And so they've been able to expedite that next level of review. And when we talk about the cost of development these days, the challenges with getting any kind of development accomplished, whether it's like projects that we looked at tonight, or if it's attainable housing, we're talking about reducing the frequency of meetings by half and extending the length of time for applicants by double. So we're basically quadrupling the time frame for these projects based off of the timeline that I'm seeing here. Also, to the point that you guys are making, we're going to double the length of our meetings. If we maintain the same level of applications, we rarely get out of here before 7. I mean, the last 2 meetings were really expeditious. You know, we have people with families who want to get home and go have dinner, you know, and to ask us to be here until 8 or later in the evening. I'm all about any kind of measure that's going to better expedite our process, allow our staff people to get time back, to save our taxpayers money. But unfortunately, this is all one-sided based off of the way it's been presented to me. I don't see any benefit to the applicant. I don't see any benefit to us to have 1 meeting a month, to sit here for 4 hours instead of 2. You know, I like the idea of revamping this, but I just don't know that this is the solution. The development community has proposed other options of how to expedite projects, but this is all going in the wrong direction, if you ask me, unfortunately.
What are the other options? I'm just curious.
Well, the development community has said if we can do expedited permitting, we'll pay. We'll pay for additional staff so they don't have to work outside of their hours. So, you know, if the development community is willing to pay to expedite the process, let them. I'm not saying that means that they get shortcuts, but to, in theory, quadruple the length of time to get through these boards. So I will never vote for that.
And it's always wonderful having Mandy Herring at our meetings. But I agree with that. My greatest concern is that a deferral that may have occurred today is going to be delayed even further in coming back potentially,
Or,
but more, but I'm, you know, what if, there's a lot of what ifs, obviously. I'd love to hear more about the issue. I've seen transparency a number of times, and I'm not sure what we being,
No,
are we not being transparent currently?
no, not that the board is. I think, again, looking holistically at the division. If we increase that deadline to meeting date just by 7 days, what that allows us to do is advertise the meetings quicker. And we don't advertise them in the Post and Courier, but we do post them and send them out to everybody. So that gives, you know, neighbors and community members more notification. It also gives, you know, staff more time to review the projects, but provide comments to the applicants well in advance of the meeting, and also comments to y'all and copies of the plans to y'all in advance of the meeting. So everybody comes in the meeting kind of knowing what the playing field is. And so you can be prepared. I know that can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you,
Yeah.
isn't, and I'm just asking this question, whether we have 3 applicants every 2 weeks or 6 applicants every month, it's still the same amount of effort and time, I'm assuming, that's going to be invested by staff with regards to the review of the applications. So, and I know
Without a
this is some,
goalpost in between.
yeah, and I'm just wondering is that more? And I know, listen, you guys are phenomenal. Y'all truly are, and I don't want anybody to think that anything I'm about to say is any indication how hard our staff work.
this is why I always followed you.
No,
He's also.
I mean, having spoken, David is the one who's our conscious from the staff standpoint here, and I know how he labors over these things, but I don't know, there's no change in quantity with regards to the review process, whether it's 3 reviews on every 2 weeks or 6 reviews. And the biggest issue that concerns me as well is what if we don't get a quorum for one meeting?
Oh, and then you gotta wait.
And then you gotta
Yeah.
wait 2
Or a couple
months.
meetings.
Yeah.
And then you really,
I mean, we're pretty good about having a forum, but I have seen that happen.
we've been
BZA.
challenged before, yeah. I mean, I didn't say it nearly as eloquent as Ashley, but I would agree with her.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. I thought this would be fine, but as soon as you said about, you know, somebody trying to get their project built, it makes total sense, the turnaround.
And I like what y'all are saying about adding other meetings as needed, but to me, for the public, that's worse. I would rather the public know we're gonna be meeting on these days, and we have that schedule on the website, and it's there all year long. And if we have engaged community members that want to know what's going to be on the agenda, they know where to go and when. And so doing it the other way around, I feel like it's more of a scramble. It's harder for people to be engaged. I would rather have more meetings and wind up not needing them and canceling them than.
Yeah, get a happy hour.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, I do think in having presented to this board and been on this board for almost 20 years now. It functions really well. And I don't present to BAR either of those, but most of the boards in the city of Charleston function very well. And yeah, I've been presenting to those about the same amount of time, and you know, I think there are other departments we won't get into, but I think people know what to expect with this board,
Can I ask?
better or worse sometimes, but
I have just 2 questions. I guess the first question is this, knowing that how much high regard and respect we have for what y'all do. Okay, the first question is, what is truly driving this? There's usually it starts with
Sounds
one
like staff.
person saying, this is what we're confronted with, how do we address this? There's got to be one particular issue. And the second question that I have is, all right, at the conclusion of this gathering now, it sounds like a lot of us wanting, well, keeping this as it is, but what is the procedural aspect? Will the DRB board members have an opportunity to weigh in into the final decision? I know we're offering opinion right now.
So again, it's not about this board
I know.
or about the BAR. It's stepping back and looking at how can that division of 6 tackle about 3,000 applications a
Okay,
year.
so it's a
That's-
staff issue.
It's a staff and time, but it is a,
Can
you
I,
know, we have applicants saying, you know, I don't know what staff's position, and again, not about this board, but I don't know what staff's position is gonna be until right before the meeting. I wish I could have met with staff more before we actually applied, you know, to do this. So I think it's, again, and Robert, feel free to jump in, but I think it's stepping back and looking at the operations of the division as a whole. And we are willing to try different things. So if you have any ideas, expedited, you know, review, we are on the same page, but that is a huge lift the planning department cannot do. So it's looking at the division operations as a whole. Like, how do we get the city architect to have more time with our DRB administrators?
It seems like a dumb question, but like, to me, the simple answer is more staff, right? I mean.
City won't pay for it.
Can we not analyze how many projects we're getting, how much time? I mean, you guys have the stats, so you know about how much time each project takes to review. Like, do we need a reallocation of application fees so that we can appropriately staff these departments? I mean, I think you're trying to solve a problem without a funding mechanism, and maybe that funding mechanism should be part of the equation.
Yes,
And I would
I will say that and I think this is more of a universal, not just is finding people who are maybe qualified to fill these positions in this day and age is very challenging.
Yeah, it's for most.
And I will
Yeah, I'm trying to tiptoe around it.
Not necessarily
Yeah.
city, but the private section.
Aaron, you had a great question. And so for 4 years straight, we requested another position in this division to help with enforcement and some staff level reviews, more BAR. Took us 4 years to get that one position approved. We are asking for another staff architect position in next year's budget. So if you could call your favorite council members
will it be
and lobby
self-funded?
for us, that would be great. But so if that's if we would love to double our staff tomorrow, we would love to increase our staff by 2 tomorrow, but it's something that's out of our control. So we're trying to figure out, okay, if we can't do this, then let's do that. We did increase our fees probably by 4 times in 2019. And we could take a look at that again, but what we do is we look at how much time it takes us to touch an application and we generate our fees that way.
Yep.
Our fees can only be based on the work cost to the city, not like a value of the project or some, you know, random fee.
Yeah.
So we're pretty tight with that right now in line. So we could take another look at it again, like if we all may start making more money next year, you know, so
If
that's
there's,
something we could look at again. It's just, we've done that recently. So we've done the staff ask, we've done the application fee request,
what
increase.
about like, I mean, with increased volume of projects, right? I mean, that would add some cost. And if you looked at, and I have no idea the stats on this, it might not be in the favor of what you're trying to get, but if you look at, you know, it sounds like applications have increased a lot and the time it takes to work on them has increased a lot, and maybe staff hasn't kept up with that. Like if you look at staff to applications
Yeah.
per year, I mean, what do those numbers tell us? I don't know.
We're actually within our number of applications have not dramatically increased. I think it's the time that goes into the
Yeah.
applications and permit center nurse, and just projects are bigger, they're more complicated, they have these reviews. So application wise, we do have all the statistics on that. It's probably pretty steady from year to year unless we have like a boom or a bust year, but those are pretty consistent. I did want to address Dinos's comment, or question. So what you have in front of you are the rules and procedures that you, the board, approve. That's in an appendix to the zoning ordinance. The city council does not approve your rules and procedures, you do. So if you know, in this discussion, you kind of see where the wind's blowing, if you decide that you do not want to change your rules and procedures, then you do not change them, and the schedule does not change.
So the board has.
Board makes the decision, yeah.
May I ask you, there's one, this is the elephant in the room right now, okay? I don't think, you guys may completely disagree, but I have seen so many denials come forward over the last year that have just been applicants that are not paying attention. We just saw a very thoughtful,
Yeah.
well-prepared presentation. But I can tell you that there are equal number of just very unthoughtful, ill-prepared presentations that come before us. I don't know how to fix that, other than the talent level that or the demands that the private sector puts on themselves with regards to the submittals. But if there's any thought, maybe that you and Robbie and we would gladly participate in, that could help out.
That's largely on me.
We could, well, it's not on you because you can't dictate. It's just like, we're not supposed to be designing for them. They're supposed to be coming forward. And, how many times have we heard that we have been inspired by low country architecture? And then when we turn around and ask, well, what is low country architecture? They're going, well, it's that. So consequently, if there's any way that we can put some focus on that, and it's not you, David. I mean, it's got to be the seriousness that the applicant comes forward, and maybe it needs to be a harder hand initially by just simply saying either bring your A game or don't come at all right now, because the board's not tolerating this.
I think it is, and it would help with your staffing if say this isn't gonna apply, you don't meet. And I know that you can't look through everything, and we're trying to help too. But if this isn't gonna meet the requirements of the board, you don't need to be looking.
Like a prototype, you just immediately say, we're not reviewing. I know, that's a different category though.
I know, but I mean, there are, just obviously that it doesn't have a streetscape, it doesn't have.
Yeah, those are the things that are.
Context.
This, the streets.
Well, even context, like you say, is that not every project would have it, but the vast majority of the ones we look at need to be, especially conceptual, need to be explained where they're coming from. And, I know that we have a checklist that says you turn this, but the board's looking beyond that checklist. I mean, we have height, scale, mass, and general architectural direction. If we don't have a sense of general architectural direction, everybody's staff's time is being wasted, the division's money's being wasted, the board's time is being wasted. And, I don't know, for us, if it's not we make a motion after presentation, it's not.
And the last thing we want to do is have to see the applicant come back again after a denial. Just like.
And they show the same thing,
Yeah, they show.
just the windows.
It's just, it's a comment. It doesn't help, but it's a comment.
Yeah, I think it does have, from a division standpoint of looking at that as because David has to look at every project, whether it meets the requirements or not. And if you can cut that off sooner, that's less time you're looking at those.
You can't prohibit someone from submitting, right? Like they have the right to do it, even if it doesn't.
If everything's there, yes, but we can also.
I did do that recently with the Chick-fil-A.
Right.
What they resubmitted was too
They said the
similar,
same
it was
thing.
not addressing a denial. And we said, sorry.
Yeah, and that is something specifically when we do deny a project to not have, if they're not making a substantial change.
Maybe a heavier hand at the beginning when they first come forward. I just, my fear is like what Ashley so beautifully put. I mean, I'm so fearful that from the private side and just bringing projects forward, that you could be 2 months between a deferral, just a deferral and an approval, or a deferral and then potentially another deferral. And the concern that I have with that is the pressure that it mounts on board members for fear that, oh my God, now we're pushing it off another 2 months again. So I would, my feeling is this, I prefer to get home by 6:30 and 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
As opposed to having to stay once a month till 9 o'clock at night.
I think there are some things in here that just generally need to be cleaned up, and it's just because this has been a while since this has been voted on. But I don't know that I am in favor of going to once.
I think we're all kind of just saying no, and I don't want to just kind of completely shut down, the idea. So I want to be part of a solution.
Yeah.
And so I'm of course being very much on the private side, thinking how can the department fund itself? And so the first question goes back to, what I mentioned before about, is there some kind of disconnect between the cost of the application fee and the actual time that's being put towards these projects? Is there something else, like, we've talked about revising some of this in terms of like being more clear on the checklist and things like that? Maybe we need to revisit that as a way to be more clear of our expectations so that David can say, this doesn't check all your boxes. I can't review this project until you're checking all the boxes. Maybe that's a way that we could save some staff time, just with a different approach. I mean, I hate to, like someone that we're going to deny, I hate for you to walk out of here without some kind of productive way for us to move forward to solve something that is
I wish we could-
obviously a
I wish we
problem.
could incentivize people that had presentations like that, like what they just did. Because to me, that's almost a preliminary approval. I'd be fine seeing that building built,
We
Yeah.
wish that those great presentations could come first so that the subsequent presentations can see what's happening.
We have control of the order of the agenda.
I think that would be a good approach, quite candidly. Let the people who really are coming forward. I mean, there's one other suggestion. If maybe 3 members, whoever they may be, might sit with you and David and Robbie and just have a more informal, less transparent conversation about certain things, that it might be beneficial that we can possibly provide more insight to. But I think I would be so concerned with, and it has happened before too, Mandy and Robbie, the aspect that this project is a large project, and deferred it 2 or 3 times. Now the pressure is on, the pressure transfers to us to approve it as opposed to the applicant for making the improvements necessary
Yeah,
for approval. And
yeah,
this was-
we're the bad guys in this.
And we've seen it and witnessed it during city council meetings by our city council members.
Let me ask you
So
this.
could I,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, so could I just ask, as in nature of, is there possible, like, some middle ground or other solution? So I'm hearing very distinctly, y'all don't want to go to 1 meeting a month. I think as a staff, we've heard that loud and clear. But I would, maybe Dinos, to your point, I would like to have maybe more of a conversation around the relatively slight extension when you factor in weekends to the time frame between when an application is submitted and when it goes before the board, because that window right now, DRB in particular has the fewest number of staff members who work in preparation for that agenda, in terms of the number of man hours, and it has the narrowest window that we have, I believe, between when applications are submitted and when the item goes before the board. And so I really, again, some best practices out there, having worked in a couple other jurisdictions, I can tell you, when we have sufficient, not overly abundant, but when we have sufficient space between when an application is submitted and to do that completeness review that you all are talking about and communicate to the public, to the applicants and to the board, those conditions, those thoughts, what have you, in advance of the meeting. You, in my experience, you come out with better results by having enough time to really review the material, submit it, and get it out into the public eye. So even if we don't change the number of meetings per year, per month, I would ask for some consideration of the somewhat nominal additional time within the application to board window.
I don't disagree at all with what you're saying, but in doing that, don't you lose that potential to resubmit, which is basically the same problem as going to have the meetings.
You do, but let me pose this question. If they're so close that 2 days worth of whatever work is going to get them to a place where you're looking at a potential approval in the next meeting, would that not be something that you all can just do an approval with conditions at that stage and make it very clear what those changes that you're looking
Maybe.
for
I don't think
are?
that's.
If they're that close to be able to turn it around that fast. I asked that question because that's a very narrow window for an applicant to turn around. It's also, again, I don't know, in my opinion, we need that time to properly review the material and to get that review out to the public.
Rob, can I make one other suggestion that might help and for consideration? There are alternates. I mean, this board has 2 architects that are alternates that I know would be delighted and have offered to sit down with staff and just offer some just initial thoughts and comments when an application comes in. I mean, those are resources that are available that are not imputing themselves when it comes to the actual presentation, and it would probably be a great help. I mean, as far as sitting down with David, I can sense, and this, you do a magnificent job and we love you to death, but I can sense that there are times possibly when we don't have an architectural insight into some of the comments that we're getting back. And you know, in spite of what I've heard from others, this board is driven by horizontal and vertical design. And you know, it'd be good, very beneficial to have somebody that's going to really, at every meeting, at every submission, at every staff comment, have the opportunity to review that and provide some architectural dialogue in this regard.
And we have requested a new staff architect to help
Yeah,
fill.
I realize that, but you've got architects that are sitting as alternates on this board right now that would be willing to volunteer their time to help in this regard until the additional staff is brought on board. Just a thought.
I understood.
I mean, if that's okay.
Yeah, we can talk about, because we probably have to be careful for legal purposes. So we can talk, so why don't we do this? Why don't we get David, Robert and I can have a discussion, and if we need to have a work session where there are no items discussed, but rather a work session with a board member or 2. And we could even put together a draft of the schedule with 2 meetings a month, but with a longer deadline lead period, just to look at the way things could work. So why don't we see if we can get David to schedule a meeting in the next week and have like a kind of discussion about some other alternatives.
Well, I think what I heard was that you want to prolong the amount of time for an applicant, whether we change or don't change the meeting schedule. And for me, that will always be a no.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Okay, when I think it's kind of terminology too. Never in our discussion have we said we want to do anything to prolong or delay an applicant. We want to make the whole process efficient, and that might include some adjustments of date. So why don't we why don't we have, kind of a work session and, figure out if there's anywhere to take this or not.
Sure.
I'm not fully understanding what you're saying about prolonging the period. So right now, if our meeting's on Monday, when would the next submittal deadline be?
No.
Tuesday?
So for example, right now you have what? There's too much information.
No, I mean, if we stated two
Well, so
meetings. a month.
so right now, that's why I think seeing some things, sometimes when you see things on paper, you're like, oh, that works, or oh, that does not work. So right now you have 12 days between your deadline and the meeting. So what our current proposal was make that 19 days, add 5 additional work days.
So
to
it'd
that.
be before the. meeting.
Right.
But when you
So
have
you skip it.
meetings every 14 days, you lose that opportunity to
Yes,
resubmit. for the
Yeah,
next
so it doesn't
meeting.
allow the 2-day turnaround. That's what I'm saying. We could run the exercise and at least look at what a potential calendar is. Because also, it's sometimes hard for firms, not all firms, to turn an application around within a week anyway, so we want to, be realistic about.
Yeah, for those conversations, I think it'd be good for us to look at our numbers and see realistically how many applications are really affected by, do they really turn around a deferral in 2 days and go to the very next meeting? So I think we'll want to pull those numbers so that you all have that information at your fingertips as well, because it may sound like it's a big deal, but in reality, it may not, or it very well may be. That we have a number of people who are somehow able to do that turnaround currently.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It is, but they have the option. And so
We
we
have
can
seen
tell
it.
them,
Yeah.
we have
That's what I'm saying.
seen some recently.
We hear what you're saying, so we'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
We understand we understand what your concern is, so we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your willingness to work several days a month. We love it here at the city of Charleston. That's
Yes,
great.
thank you.
Great.
Well,
Thank you, Mary and Robert.
Yeah. And this really is just a discussion. I don't think we were taking a vote.
Motion to drink.
Motion to adjourn.
second.
I think we're just done.